Welcome to Mixed Media Creations with me, Creative Katie, Karen Burchill. Follow me on Instagram. See what I'm up to with sneak peeks of upcoming projects. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Today we're going to be working on Journaling by Five Revisited and Revamped, Free Play and Finishing. This is the third of 5 finishing videos, but this one has a little something different. I think 3 of these pages get some very different treatments. Let's start with this one. So on this one, we have these 3 bottles. And right from when I saw them in the magazine, I thought, okay, I can white that out. So what I'm doing here is applying a thin coat of white gesso. I know that I will probably have to do at least 2, maybe 3 coats. Thinner best, come back and add to it. And that way you get better coverage and it doesn't get all kind of gloopy. So you don't have to take the magazine pages exactly as they are. I really didn't want, the bottle saying tequila. So any of the writing that's there, I'm going to be very slowly and carefully painting out the words. And I'm using an angle brush. For some reason, I find that an angle brush in smaller, tighter spaces, I seem to have more control. But use whatever brush works for you. And you can see here, 1 coat of this isn't going to cover it perfectly. Now, this background seems quite a bit busy, but I like the colors in it. There's some of that tan and golden colors in the background, which is why I chose this focal image for this background. So I'm using a 3-part quote, and it was going to say I choose faith over anxiety, hope over worry, and love over fear. And at first I was going to do live, love, laugh on the bottles, and then I found this quote and I really liked it. And it was a little something different than what you normally see. Another idea would have been to put wishes that you hope for someone on here. Anything can go, or you can just white them out and leave them blank. And as I've said before, finishing is slow, meticulous kind of work. So be prepared to spend time. Doing the backgrounds is quick and easy in comparison. So after giving this a quick dry, I am looking at these star flowers that I stenciled with modeling paste through the stencil. And I'm just painting them darker. I just want them to stand out a little bit more. I don't know that I was fully successful in this. It didn't quite pop as much as I would have liked it to. But in the end, I'm happy with the focal point being the bottles. But I really like the way that the texture paste, the star flower, kind of swoops throughout the page. It does give some motion to the page. Now I'm edging this page because I'm not sure what I want to do. And I'm just using my woodless charcoal pencil. And that adds to it. Instantly, it looks a little bit more finished than it did before I did that. Now, using the float technique and my black acrylic paint, I'm just shading around these bottles. I really want these bottles to pop from that rather busy background. I'm not a big fan of the background. I mean, it works because it's, kind of the front colors are the the orange and yellow, and those are the complement color to the purple, but I'm not really fond of it. But I like the challenge of using this picture and altering this picture. Now I'm using a little bit of white acrylic paint and using the float technique. I'm putting white on the one side and the dark on the others, and that's to give some highlights and shading. Now I admit that is not something I'm very competent at doing. It's something I'm just starting to be aware of in my art. So I'm not 100% sure that I was effective doing what I was doing, but that was why I was doing it. And I'm adding a little bit of the float technique right on the magazine picture. Remember, you don't just have to do it on the background. You can alter the actual magazine or free printable. So I want those flowers to stand out. So I'm going to try to rub some gold paint on them to make them stand out, but that really didn't work very well. Sometimes it's the idea in your head that interferes with allowing the page to be what it wants to be. You persist. So then I decide, as I've done in a previous video, to put the gold in the center of the flowers. I'm thinking, well, that might, we'll just introduce that gold color throughout. And I wanted a little bit more of that gold because it is in the bottles in the front. Decide that I want to put some script stamp on here. And I'm looking at the finished piece and I'm thinking, okay, I didn't even remember I did that. Oh, here's why I totally got rid of it. I didn't like the look. I thought I could maybe push back some of the background or lighten it or something, but it didn't work. Then I decided I wanted to stencil some star flowers in there, and I didn't like that either. Now the reason I'm able to get that acrylic paint off is because there's a coat of gel medium on there. And then I'm going to splatter with white. And I like that effect. It kind of lightens the background a little bit, just enough to make me happy. So really, there's nothing that you can do when you're finishing or doing a page that you can't, at some way later down the road, undo. So I semi-fussy cut these words, and these words are in the font Beyond the Mountain, another lovely script stamp, and the ones below it the font is called the Tribal Box, and I'm pretty sure I got that one from defont.com, and it actually puts the line above and below it. Now I wanted to incorporate the word I choose in the corner, and there was even room there. It just didn't seem to fit. When it was with the white on there, in, just the rectangular shape. It seemed like there was too much white and it was taking away from the focal point. And then when I cut this, it just seemed to slip into the background a little too much. It'll go in my stash. You'll see it appear somewhere else. And I'm just using gel medium and gluing this down. It's a matte finish because I don't want it to shine. If you use something with a gloss finish for gluing things down, unless you are so careful that none of it seeps on the sides, you're going to end up with little bits of glare here and there. Still not ready to give up on it, but sometimes you have to listen to what the page is telling you. So I'm getting my micron pen out and I'm just adding some of these lines. Some of these lines were lost when I used the white gesso to paint out the tequila words. So I'm just adding them back in. Even the changes that I make have some connection to other parts in the page. So everything that you've done contributes to where you end up. So I have these little heart stamps. I've got a collection of all these little stamps that came from different various sentiment stamp sets, little hearts, little diamonds, little snowflakes, and I keep them all in one place. And I thought, okay, here's a perfect place to put 3 little hearts in here. Then I have this little curly Q, and I decide, oh, I'm going to put that on the corners of the bottles just to make it a little bit more ornate. I always love it when I can use things in my stash that I rarely use. I want the ribbon to stand out a little bit more, but I'm not a big fan of outlining things solidly, so I'm using kind of a dash system here. And it gives a little bit of outlining, makes them stand out just that little bit more without being so precise as if I just totally outlined it. But that's, again, a personal choice. So when you're doing the pages, once you start, you will find you should get ideas of what you can do. I don't have all these ideas ready to go. I knew I was going to paint words on here, paint out the tequila words and do other things, but beyond that, I really didn't have a set idea. So I'm getting my big brush pens, my markers, and I'm in the colors of the bottles. And I'm just using them and smearing. Now these are permanent when dry because they are India ink, and I apologize that this is off screen here. But you have some time to be able to smudge them if you're putting them on a non-porous surface. And this surface is non-porous because I had a coat of gel medium there. So it will be slick. If it was just raw paper, it would soak right into the paper. Now, if I didn't have these, I could use the float technique, I could use my watercolor technique, or use watercolor pencils, in whatever color there was. So don't think you need to rush out and buy those for just one purpose. Use what you have. So moving on to the next page, I'm not sure what I want to do in the background, so I'm starting with shading this girl, making this focal image pop out a little bit more. And I go around her, and then you will see me doing some of the shading right on her clothing as well, and her hat. I just want it to have a little bit more presence. I want it to stand out a little bit more. Now the background is fairly busy. I love that texture paste. I'm liking the white in there, but it's kind of complicating things a little bit. But I'm not sure at this point in time what I'm going to do. Which if I did have the idea, I wouldn't have made it harder for myself, because I don't get the idea until much later in the process. So then I have some white spaces on the end, and so I grab some of that aqua teal color, and I'm just filling in the paint in some of these places. I'm trying to stay true to where the paint was. I'm not really changing the color. I'm just evening it out a little bit, using the palette knife to scrape some of that purple paint on to keep that feel of how I put the paint on it in the original. Using the palette knife to put paint on is not something that was part of my repertoire, but after doing it with the JB5s, I am finding I'm doing that more and more often, and I'm really liking the effect. So now I'm edging the outside. Now instead of using black here, what I'm using is Payne's Gray. And Payne's Gray reads like a very dark navy almost. And it's, I like to use it when there's blue tones or pink tones on a page, and I don't want to go with the stark black contrast. Then I need to add some black splatters, covering up my focal point as much as possible and removing quickly with a baby wipe. So again, these 4 pages took about an hour and a half to finish, and that's with the fonts pretty much cut out and ready to go. That I kind of did at my computer, sitting in front of the TV over time. Now the font that I used here is called Beyond the Mountain. It's another one of the lovely scripts that I have used. I'm pretty sure this one was a free font from dafont.com. And the quote here says, "Be a seeker of everyday magic." And it seemed to go well with this girl. She seems to be doing magic there. And I'm just going to apply, thinking that my background is completely done. I'm going to glue this down with gel medium. Now, because there's texture underneath, I'm using a little bit more gel medium because it's not a flat surface. So it's a little bit more difficult to get it to lay flat. But the texture in my mind is always so worth it. And then I'm just touching up some of the letters. Again, I didn't, one of the problems when you print out sentiments, sometimes the ink comes up and it gets lighter when you glue it. Then I'm shading around with the same Payne's Gray. I'm shading around the sentiment blocks, and that just kind of makes it blend into the background a little bit more. It took me a long time to be so free and fast with the shading. For a long time, I was never happy. It just looked too messy and too blotchy with the shading, with the, acrylic floating. I want the girl to pop a little bit more, so I'm adding another layer. And, I'm thinking, okay, now we're re-edging a little bit, making that a little darker because we're almost done, right? No. I decide to grab the same stencil and some white paint, and I am stenciling in some places going exactly where the stencil was before, having some more white in there. And if one or two is good, then 5 or 7 or 8 of them are better. So I just keep going till the entire background I've stenciled. That kind of got carried over on there, so I'm reapplying it. Now this would have been much easier to apply before the sentiment was put down, right? But I didn't know. And I don't know what made me think to grab that stencil and add the white. But I love, love, love how it ended up. Now I love the colors of this page, but there's a little too much white and it's causing me, it doesn't look finished enough. There's not enough white to make it go. So I'm getting out the teal and I'm getting out this red violet color and I'm just painting it in, smudging it with my fingers. Sometimes the paint here when I'm doing this is fairly watered down. So I'm still, I'm going with the basic colors that were there and the feel, but I'm really smoothing out the background, if that makes sense. Polishing it up, maybe that's a better term. But I'm sticking to the colors that were there. And this is why I say when you're putting paint on in that initial step of applying color, don't worry if there are places that don't have color. Maybe you'll like them, like you've seen some of them. I've left a lot of white space. And if not, you can always go in and add color in the free play finishing stage. Now that I've done this, and I'm looking at it and I'm going, the problem with this, it's just looking a little too flat. There just wasn't enough interest in it. It kind of pushed the stenciling, the texture of the stencil back, so you don't really notice it. It removed the white, so I'm thinking to myself, now what can I do? So I'm trying to highlight the stenciling to make it pop a little bit. And it's working a bit, but not exactly. So I'm drawing and I'm thinking, what can I do? What can I do? How can I make this less flat looking, more interesting? And I'm thinking it has to do with I need to add more depth of color, more, break it up a little bit. And then I decide, what if I add it white? But I didn't want to add splatter because, well, you know what? I've done a lot of splattering. So I grabbed this swirl stamp, and I believe it's a Bow Bunny stamp. And if I can find it in Amazon, I'll put a link to it in the description box. And then I'm just adding it. I'm putting white acrylic paint on there with a cut and dry foam. And I'm just adding these swirls. Excuse me. And again, it's a little bit more difficult because, of course, we've got the focal point on here right now. So you're going around that. But I know that I've got a coat of gel medium on top of the focal point, so if I do get some on there, I can wipe it off fairly quickly. So I'm liking the swirls. It kind of, makes it look a little magical. It lightens the page, gives it some interest that was missing before, I thought. So I'm going back to the float technique, and I'm using Payne's Gray, and the reason for that is because there's a very blue background here. And I didn't think I needed to go black as dark, but I think I might have switched it up and used some black. And I think that's what I'm doing right now. But often if you try it, if you're wanting to use a color, try it and see, does it give you the effect that you like? If I started with the black and it was too black, that may have, wrecked the page, right? So start light and then build from there. So really the colors that I had on here led to the selection of the focal point, which then led to adding the more depth of color in the background. And the feel. This looks like it's, maybe in a garden and these little tiny, Cabbage Patch Kids kind of thing. If you think I've really reworked this page, wait till one of the next upcoming videos, because there I really reworked the page. And you'll be able to see what to do when you absolutely don't like what's going on in the background at all. What then? Now again, when I chose, to do these ones, it was just whatever was appealing to me at the time. Some of them I didn't have a solid idea. Some I knew the quote that I wanted. And so it was easier. Once you have some of those pieces figured out, the rest can come easier. The pages that I typically left to the end were the ones that I was really unsure of. But in the end, you just have to start. Now again, when I'm looking for fonts or looking for quotes, I just often go to Pinterest and I Google, I do a search, something about blooming, something about growing, something about whatever. And I pick several, I write them down, I save them on my inspirational quote board. And then I play with my word processing, my word program. So this one says bloom and grow, and like it said, this script font is called Bananas Personal. Another script one that I like. So if you can't find some of the other ones that I've named for free on dafont.com, know you can find something similar because there's so many there. And I will put a link to the video where I talk about how to get the fonts from dafont.com. Here you see me using my Posca pen and just darkening up the letters so they're bolder. And just shading a little more around the words. Now the fonts that are used on this one are Lost in the Wild, that's the script font, and the LW Simple. And that's the one you see me using a lot when I make my Just Sayings, and that I use on a lot of my ATC videos. So I'm adding some gold in the texture paste that swirls across the page. There was a little bit there, and there's a little bit in the upper right-hand corner. And I just wanted to add more of it because I wanted it like the butterfly is flying through there and leaving a trail of gold in its wake. So I just added some gold there and I thinned it down. Now there's black in the butterfly and there's black stamping on this page, so it just makes sense to use black around the outside edges. And I go pretty heavy with the black because I really wanted it to stand out. And I could have left it right here without any sentiment. And you know what? If that's what you like, feel free not to feel compelled to put words on a page. It's your page. Do what feels good for you. For me, a lot of times I struggle with it doesn't seem finished until I put words on it. Just using the float technique. And a little bit of splattering with the red color. Now I apologize, I lost some footage on here where I glue down the sentiment on the top and the bottom. I put the sentiment on the bottom because there was a piece of collage paper right across the bottom that just seemed out of place. So I kind of pushed it back by putting the saying, "Great things never came from comfort zone." So when you see that in the final pictures, you'll know how or why that ended up where it ended up. So here are the 4 finished pages. Really quite proud of myself on changing that one. There you can see the great things never came from comfort zones. Thanks for watching.